What is up, everybody? I'm Raymond Summerlin. This is the Sharp Angles podcast, the Sunday recap edition of the Sharp Angles podcast. I am joined, as I am every single Sunday, by Curtis Hirsch and Tucker Bagley to discuss the week that was, and we have a fun week finally, y'all. And both of your teams had buys this week, so that was nice. The Eagles definitely on bye, and Curtis's Cowboys just absolutely demolishing the Giants. Is that game even over yet, Curtis? I don't even think it's over, but I haven't paid attention to it
Who
for a long
cares,
time.
right? Like it was over after
Yeah.
the first half. It was one of those, let's just get on with this already. Is Tony Pollard going to score a touchdown? No, and then let's move on.
We do have a game still going on that's exciting. The Commanders just scored a touchdown and have an extra point attempt here to tie the game. We'll talk about that game a little bit later after it concludes. But if you're watching live on YouTube and you see me kind of darting my eyes over to the right side of the screen, that is what I am doing. By the way, if you're not watching this live on YouTube, you can come and watch us on YouTube every single Sunday at 7:30 Eastern on the Sharp Football Analysis YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Sharp Football, you'll find us, subscribe, and you'll get notified whenever we go live. And we go live a lot throughout the week. We're going to have live on Wednesday nights to talk about Thursday Night Football Showdown. We're live twice on Thursday to talk about betting and fantasy and DFS. And then obviously we do this show as well. So a lot of content out there. Go to YouTube, search it up, and make sure you're paying attention to what we've got going. But we need to get started here with the same exact player that we talked about at the beginning of the show last week, Tucker. I know Curtis wasn't here. Curtis wasn't here last week. He was busy sipping Mai Tais in Mexico. I hope you had a good time doing that. But Tucker, we're in the exact same spot we were with CJ Stroud. I put it just in the notes. The legend grows. This is twice now, 2 weeks in a row that he's had this game-winning drive. And I mean, he's unbelievable. Like he's really playing better than a rookie coming in I can remember in a long time. Like I can't think of a rookie playing quarterback playing better than what he's been playing. Am I missing someone, Tucker? Like this has really been special.
Yeah, and I know we're at the midway point of the season now, but for me, just think about how well he's done early on, right? Because we've seen quarterbacks kind of play well later on in the rookie season. Someone like RG3, you kind of think about and the way he progressed as a rookie in Washington, and then we know how that ended, but he really set himself up to look to be the future of that franchise. But CJ Stroud, the fact that he's playing like this so early into his career and has really been playing like this for the last 5 or 6 weeks or so, it's just unbelievable. Like to the point now where you can have conversations about him now kind of being on the precipice of being a part of the MVP conversation. Now, part of that's because no one else has really separated themselves, but the fact that you can have that conversation and not necessarily laugh about it or say that's ridiculous and scoff at it, I just think is a huge thing for him in this franchise. I mean, just think about what the Texans looked like last year, and then you add this kid into the mix, and he had a really bad interception that kind of let Cincinnati back into the game, but I think it's even more impressive that he was able to fight back and he was able to lead them on that game-winning drive as time expired to set up that 38-yard field goal to win the game. I mean, the kid just checks a new box every week. It's just unbelievable to watch him. And we said last week, and I'll say it again, like, we're not grading him like a rookie quarterback. Like, he surpassed that. Like, whatever rubric or criteria you use for rookie quarterback, rip that sheet up and start grading him like a real professional NFL veteran quarterback, because he's playing like a top 10, top 5 quarterback in the NFL right now.
Glad you mentioned the MVP race because we actually had a tweet go out from our Twitter asking about who's your NFL MVP right now. Lamar Jackson's not on this list, which I know they lost today, and we'll get to that in a second. But Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson should have been on this list. I voted other for that, but if you look at the votes, Stroud ended up with 41.9% of the votes. Like people are really getting into CJ Stroud, maybe not even just being offensive rookie of the year, making a push for MVP. And yeah, Curtis, I don't know if I'm going to strongly disagree with that at this point, especially after what we've seen the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, like what he did this afternoon, that was against Lou Amarumo's defense that has made Patrick Mahomes struggle over at times, and he doesn't have a Travis Kelce. He's thrown the ball to Noah Brown today and absolutely came up huge after making a big mistake, and he led another game-winning drive. It's unbelievable what the kid is doing. MVP, it's a good story. Is he the MVP? Probably not, but it's still a hell of a story, and I'm putting him ahead of Trevor Lawrence moving forward in my quarterback rankings because he's shown what he's got so far, and Lawrence seems to be going the other way. So that's going to be very interesting to see how that division plays out the rest of the way, because they're hot, and if they continue to throw the ball like they are now, I think they win a few more games earlier in the season if they got rid of the run game a little quicker than they did. But yeah, fun story.
Yeah. First of all, to that run game, it was actually able to work against the Bengals, which that's more surprising than anything else coming out of this
Everybody can
game.
run against the Bengals, though. That's the one thing.
Texans have not run against anyone. So what they were doing, that's really impressive. But I'm glad you brought up that they should have been throwing more, because I wonder if that loss to the Panthers, a game that was, and Bobby Slowick, their offensive coordinator, deserves all the plaudits that he's getting and going to end up getting. But that game and the game plan they had there, and not using CJ Stroud the way they should have used CJ Stroud. I wonder if that comes back to bite them. But now, I mean, you mentioned Trevor Lawrence. We'll get to that game, them getting absolutely destroyed by the 49ers. We'll get to that later. But they're now only a game behind the Jaguars. They've already won a game against them. So, yeah, this division is wide open. I don't think I thought that after that Panthers game. After the Panthers game, I was like, all right, so I guess the Jaguars are going to do this. Now this is more interesting. For the Bengals, if we go over to that side, this is the issue with the Bengals start. This is the issue when starting out 1-3, is that this isn't a bad loss for the Bengals. The Texans are good. The Bengals came back in this game and showed a lot to come back and end up, tying this game, and before CJ Stroud had the game-winning touchdown. But when you start 1-3, you leave yourself zero margin for error, and they're in a tough spot. They have the Ravens, Steelers, and Jaguars in the next 3 weeks. They finish with the Chiefs and Browns. It's a tough spot here for the Bengals. It's a tough place to be. I think we all believe, or at least I know I believe, that the Bengals are one of the best teams in football, but that doesn't earn you a playoff spot. And so this is going to be interesting to watch down the stretch, Tucker.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting situation for Cincinnati, because you mentioned, like, they started out 1-3 and a lot of people wrote them off. And then leading into today, like, people were talking about Joe Burrow. Maybe, the way he's played the last few weeks, his completion percentage is like 75% since, that rough stretch. He'd been playing unbelievable. They won a couple big games before their bye week. And, today, their first half, they offense played well on the first drive. They had a touchdown drive on the opening drive. And then I think they had 5 straight punts before they finally kicked a field goal, like midway through the third quarter, to make it 20-10. But this is a team that I think was inconsistent to start the season. They kind of put things together, and they were better today than I think they were early on. But the margin for error is so thin when you're in a division like they're in right now, where everyone has a winning record. When you are playing in this league, you can't start out 1-3, and like the margin for errors is just so thin for them right now that losing a game like this, like, I don't think if you're Joe Burrow, you necessarily hold your head, even though he threw 2 interceptions today. But I mean, this is a game that I think when we get to the end of the season and maybe they're on the outside looking in on the playoff picture, this will be kind of what they point to.
And I think, we'll get to Browns Ravens here in a second, but this AFC playoff picture, this AFC playoff fight, Curtis, it's going to be wild. And it's one of those years where I wish, this is often true in the NBA, when the Eastern Conference was really bad, and you'd be like, can we just give some of their playoff spots to the Western Conference? We're kind of there with the NFC right now, where there's going to be a very good AFC team that is not going to make the playoffs. Maybe multiple, because the Chargers, they lost today to the Lions, but that was a good performance. I think the Chargers are good and have just been messed up by their schedule. It's a bloodbath in the AFC right now.
Yeah, and then if you had a crossover, that team that got in the last spot would actually have a chance to make it through, because I think the 7th rated team or 8th rated team could win that division or go to the other conference and win. So yeah, like Tucker was saying, when you start 1-3, you leave yourself, you need to run pure moving forward, and then you don't have the T. Higgins injury. You can't have stuff like that happen if you're going to try to make it to the playoffs after starting like that. So sometimes it's out of your hands after you start 1-3. And today, if they have T. Higgins, they probably win that game. And a healthy Jamar Chase, they still probably win the game. But They had no T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase is battling a bad back. And now you got the Ravens on deck, who they're. Can we talk about the Ravens and the Steelers having the same record? Is that real? Like,
it doesn't make any sense. Like, it makes no sense.
The Ravens have lost the 3 most weird games, and then Kenny Pickett has six touchdowns this season, and they're 6-3. Like, and the Bengals are burying themselves behind that team. Like, the Steelers are gonna beat them somehow. It's crazy.
And that's the problem. Is you're also, not just that you started 1-3, you're also in the best division in football too, and so it kind of compounds itself. And I don't know if the Steelers are actually any good, but I mean, they're winning. They've been outgained in every game this season. They've been outgained in every game this season. That suggests to me that you're running on the extreme good side of variance. But wins are wins. They've got them banked in there. And so, yeah, this division, it's tough. Let's get to that. Let's get to that division. Let's get to the Ravens and Browns. Before we do that, though, I do want to mention that Sharp Football Analysis, we have a ton of content every single week. Curtis will have his waiver wire column up on Tuesday. Rich Rebar has his worksheet game previews. It's a preview of every single game, every single offensive player that's important in every single game. That's in there. Warren Sharp's giving out his betting recommendations. If you saw me get excited at the end here just a second ago, it's because DK Metcalf went over his total, and that was something that I had bet, and we had big thing that we had given out this week. So DK Metcalf went over. Thank you, Run Pure DK. And so all of those betting recommendations, all of that, you can get that at sharpfootballanalysis.com. You use promo code ANGLES, ANGELS. No, is that Angels? ANGLES. There we go. I can spell. If you use that over at sharpfootballanalysis.com, you will get 15% off. So use promo code ANGLES. You can see it in the podcast description, the YouTube description. You don't have to rely on my spelling to get us there. But we move on, staying in the same division here with the Browns and the Ravens. The Browns fight back to beat the Ravens 33-31. It was a absolutely massive game. It is a win that I think the Browns absolutely needed. And it's a bit of a setback for a Ravens team that I was starting. And now, Curtis, and you and I had conversations about this team being the best team in football. And now kind of we're back to square one. So what's your biggest takeaway, Curtis, coming out of that game?
The script writers wrote a really good script in that game. That was just pure chaos. There was nothing but nonstop chaos in that game, with the interception, and then they missed the extra point to tie it, and then come back and win it with a late field goal. So I'm still a believer in the Ravens. Their defense, they had a couple, was it 2 defensive scores, weird touchdowns off batted passes of Lamar today. And then they did give up, like Jerome Ford actually had a pretty big day rushing the ball. Yeah. I'm sure they can tidy that up a bit, but I still think the Ravens are the class of that division and probably one of the top 2 teams in the conference.
Yeah, I still think that's probably true. But what I'll say, I'm glad you mentioned Ford, because we've given Ford grief on this podcast. I know Rich Rebar and I have, and this was actually a good game for him. He had been living on long runs. This was actually a good game for him. That running game working against this Ravens team was really impressive. I don't know how good Deshaun Watson actually was. Tucker, it looks like he picked up an ankle injury or something. He was in a boot after the game. So we're going to have to look at that and kind of see what's going on there. But I mean, the Browns, this is a massive win for them, a win they needed. They've now beaten the 49ers without Deshaun Watson. They've beaten the Ravens with Deshaun Watson. They're certainly making their case that they deserve to be talked about among the elite in the AFC.
Yeah, and I thought after the game, I know they gave up 31 points, but they had a defense touchdown there. Is there a unit more impressive in the NFL right now than the Browns defense?
It's tough. I mean, like maybe the Jets defense just because of what they're working with on the other side, but like that's
the Browns aren't working with anything much better, right? Like with what Deshaun Watson, I know he had a good second half today after he came back. But the fact that they won a game with PJ Walker at quarterback earlier in the season, the fact they are still winning with an offense that's not necessarily moving the ball that well, and you see what they did today, where they just clamped down on Baltimore, a team that everyone after last week was saying was the best team in the NFL, and you go out and you beat them the way you did today. I look at the Browns and it's not impressive, but they keep winning. And I just think their defense right now, what they're able to do, the way they're able to force turnovers, which isn't something you can necessarily rely on a week-to-week basis. But I just think what Jim Schwartz has done with that defense, what Myles Garrett and the rest of those guys have done, I have a hard time, picking anybody else who's been more impressive than them this season.
Can I ask a hypothetical? If Deshaun Watson misses more time, they have to go to DTR, right? Like the PJ Walker experience has to come to an end at some point in time. Tucker, you're not allowed to answer this. You're biased.
The DTR, like the DTR the DTR start against this Ravens team is what led to them moving on to PJ Walker.
So I don't know. 10 minutes notice. I don't even think he knew he was. I don't think he woke up and knew he was starting. So if you give DTR a week of practice, his ceiling has to be higher than PJ Walker's, right?
Well, Tucker, are you allowed to answer this question?
No, he's not. No, he's not allowed to answer.
I think we all know what I'm going to say, so I can recuse myself from this discussion. But
yeah,
I mean, PJ Walker played and they won against him.
Let's change this subject. And yeah, someone did mention
3-1 when PJ Walker plays this year. I'm just saying.
Yeah, someone mentioned in the chat what was with the Keaton Mitchell. He had a long touchdown. He had a 34-yard catch and run, and then he had to sit on the bench the rest of the game. It was pretty surprising. I seemed a little peculiar on that side as well. So whoever mentioned that in the chat.
He had 2 targets, 3 carries. And he ended up with 66 yards or something like that in a touchdown.
2 of those plays went for over 30 yards apiece, and then he doesn't touch the field. That might have led to part of the problems there too.
Yeah, and this from the Ravens' perspective, this game, and it was much, the Steelers game was much lower scoring than this game, but this game felt similar to the Steelers game, and that it felt like they should have been able to pull away in the second half. And to be fair to them, they kind of did. They were up 31-17 with 11 minutes and 34 seconds left in this game. So they had a 2-score lead at that point. No, more than that, a 3-score lead, right? At that point. And so they were in a decent spot, but the KO never came. Zay Flowers had some moments, but Mitchell, we're not getting him involved as much in the second half. It seemed like I've had this issue with this team throughout the year. It seems like sometimes the offense just kind of gets stuck and they don't really have a way to get out of that. And it's a concern because this offense is very good. This team is very good. It's one of the best teams in the league. But you would like to see fewer lulls, I think, than kind of what we got. Maybe, Odell, he only had the 1 catch, but it was a 40-yard touchdown. Maybe we get him more involved. Rashad Bateman looked healthier this week. And so, things are still fine in Baltimore. But yeah, why didn't we see more Mitchell? We did see a ton of injuries in this game, though, on kind of both sides of the ball. We mentioned Deshaun Watson, Marlon Humphrey, Ronnie Stanley, Denzel Ward. Any of those stand out to you, Tucker, as things we need to really worry about?
Yeah, the Ronnie Stanley one's interesting because he missed a lot of time early on in the season with a knee injury. So if this is a similar thing, that'd be worrisome. He has a history of ankle injuries, though. He missed almost all of a 3-year stretch due to an ankle injury. So the fact that it's a knee and moving up his leg, I guess, is a bit of an improvement. That it's not the same thing, but that's something for me. If he's not at left tackle for them moving forward, I'm not sure who their backup is right now or who came in for him, but when he's healthy, I think he's a very good left tackle. So I think that might be something that's more long term than any of the other ones that we're looking at. Even though Marlon Humphrey has missed some time this year as well. I don't know. Ronnie Stanley's just
Marlon Humphrey one. Actually, the Marlon Humphrey one was no contact, and to me, it looked like an Achilles. And so I don't know if we've gotten any news on that, but that one.
Yeah, Harbaugh didn't have any update after the game on either guy, so that might be something where you're right. We might hear tomorrow that he might be done for the season. And they did add Rock Ya-Sin at the trade deadline to kind of shore up that position, but that's still a drop off there at cornerback. But this is something that kind of killed the Ravens last year, right? They dealt with a ton of injuries last year. I think that's why their team really sputtered. And obviously they lost Lamar at the end of the season, and that kind of doomed them. But I mean, these are two guys now in Humphrey and Stanley who have been hurt quite a lot over the last 2 or 3 years.
Got a couple questions here in the chat. I wanna take a look at. Should I sell Kenneth Walker after a big game? Who could I target? Need a running back. The concerns you had about Kenneth Walker before this game was that Zach Charbonnet was getting a lot of the work and playing a lot of snaps. Obviously we're right after the game. I don't have the snap information, but just from my eye test, I don't know what you saw, Curtis. It seemed like that was less of a concern. This week, Kenneth Walker ended up with 19 carries, the 6 for Zach Charbonnet, and then was involved. He had that 64-yard touchdown catch. I think that the concerns you had about Kenneth Walker, it seems like those are less of a concern. Worried about schedule for the playoffs. Okay, that's a fair worry as well. I just think with Kenneth Walker, you're getting a guy who's getting, if he's right and healthy, which I don't think he had been the 2 weeks before this, he's a good bet for 15 to 20 touches, and that is hard to find in the fantasy football landscape. So I wouldn't be looking to sell him, but Curtis, I'm open. What do you think?
I love the Kenneth Walker experience as well, because at any point in time, he can put up 15 points on a single play, because you saw it today. He got the 60-yard reception for a touchdown and another point for PPR, 13 points in one play. He can do that any single time he touches the ball. He hasn't been doing it as often, but those big plays are there, and come the fantasy playoffs, that's what you want around. So I'm holding on to him, especially with the fact that Zach Charbonnet was not involved to get as much as he was in the last couple of weeks. And I'm sure, like Ray said, there's some more underlying issue that Walker was dealing with that had Charbonnet, who hadn't played previously, step up his role in the snaps. So I'm going with Walker.
And that schedule, I didn't know what their schedule was. I'm glad you brought it up, George. Their schedule is in the playoffs. The Eagles in week 15, that is a runaway and hide matchup. So that is true.
Okay.
But then the Titans in week 16, the Titans have not been as strong against the run lately. So, we'll see kind of what they look like by that time. And then the Steelers have a good defense, but you're not scared of their run defense for sure. And so, yeah, I don't know how bad that schedule, actually is. The 49ers haven't been, as good as you would want them to be against the run. You get them twice. Yeah, I'm not as scared of that schedule as I would be. Maybe kind of looking at the names that are on it. This from Luca, need 12 points. Greg Zuerlein or Daniel Carson. Curtis, I don't answer kicker questions. Do you have any strong opinions?
Coin, man.
So I guess if I'm thinking about it, you have the Raiders going up against a tougher defense. Maybe they're less likely to score in the red zone. Maybe that's where I go with Daniel Carson.
I don't know. No, I'm going the other way. I don't think the Raiders score any points tonight. How are they going to score?
So, yeah, that is a fair point. The Raiders team under might be good. All right, yeah, I agree with Curtis. All right, we've made our decision. There you go. That is where we stand. Yeah. I didn't know I'd ever answer a kicker question, so here we are. I apologize, Jake Seeley, for answering kicker questions. All right, let's move on. We did have a big injury game. Unfortunately, the Vikings and Saints. We didn't have a ton of injuries today that are super, like fantasy impact injuries. We did have a lot of defensive injuries. Unfortunately, we've talked about a few of them, but the one game where we had all these injuries was in Vikings and Saints. We had Derek Carr leave with a big hit to his shoulder with concussion concerns. Michael Thomas, who's just having an absolutely great week, really great week, Michael Thomas. He left with a knee injury, and then Alexander Mattison on the other side left that game with a concussion. So I guess, Tucker, we get started with Derek Carr here and kind of where they are. The Saints are on bye next week. The reports came out that he was hopeful that he would be able to play after that bye week. But I mean, that was a rough hit and a pretty quick rule out. Kind of what are you looking at there?
Yeah, so Dennis Allen said after the game that he was ruled out due to a concussion, not the shoulder injury.
Interesting.
And usually at this point, since really the Tua injury last year, like concussions are almost always a 2-week injury. You're not coming back the following week after a concussion, which he doesn't have to worry about, right? Because you have the bye week coming up. So I think it'll be interesting to see. Like, this is something that we're not going to really get any update on until next week because of the bye week. So we won't really know where he's at until next Wednesday when the first injury report comes out. But I wouldn't be surprised if next Wednesday, heading into their week 12 game, we hear limited in practice, still in concussion protocol, and he might be, on the fence heading into Friday or Saturday next week. But I don't think it's out of the question. Like I'm not really sure if they're gonna really be cautious, right? Because he doesn't necessarily have a history of concussions. So it's just the bye week is helpful because he gets the week off. He might not miss any time, but from our standpoint, when you're looking for updates and results, pretty sure it's going to be radio silent in New Orleans for the next 5 or 6 days.
Can we ask Chris
unless the
Olave
shoulder
how he
injury
feels?
is bad. Like unless the shoulder injury is bad, and then that becomes a concern. And to your point, Curtis, you said something about Chris Olave. Chris Olave, he might be more interested. Jameis didn't play great, so Jameis didn't play well. He threw 2 interceptions, but for some reason, Chris Olave he catches passes from Jameis Winston, and things went really well for him there with the Mike Thomas injury. We'll see what that is as well. His foot was planted and he got hit and it kind of bent awkwardly. And so I don't really know what that injury is, but are there any kind of fantasy takeaways here? Any players that you're looking at on the waiver wire if Michael Thomas ends up missing some time?
Yeah, preseason DFS player A.T. Perry, speedster. So how fun would this
legend.
How fun would this offense be with Jameis, Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and A.T. Perry, man? Like he could still get 30 for 30. He could still put up the 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions even with half the season. Like that, you've got 2 absolute speedsters. This guy who loves to chuck the ball, just close his eyes and throw it down the field. Like it could be fun to watch. So yeah, if Thomas is out or if Thomas is dealing with some legal issues in the next little while, he definitely needs to be rostered, and it definitely opens up Shaheed to get some more snaps too. So should be a fun offense to watch, unless Derek Carr is passing the ball to Taysom Hill every pass.
And I know Shaheed is rostered in like the deeper leagues, the high stakes leagues that you play in and that I mostly play in. But I would assume in shallower leagues that he's out there in a lot of those.
In the home leagues, he has to be available. That's my assumption, because it's hard to start him in these deeper leagues on a weekly basis because you're either getting 20 points or you're getting 2 points. So I'm assuming he's available in most home leagues.
Yeah, and so if he's available, go and check that out because that'd be interesting. I mean, it's a problem because he is on bye next week and we're not going to get a lot of news. So maybe just a name to file and kind of see what happens. With Alexander Mattison left with a concussion, as you were saying earlier, Tucker, concussions, they tend to be 2 week. I mean, we've seen that change. We saw Brock Purdy play, for instance. But I mean, I don't know if you saw the Mattison hit. It was a rough hit that he took straight to his head. So I'm a little bit worried about him moving forward. What's your kind of thought of?
Yeah, I agree. And running back's a little bit more of a physical position than quarterback, so I think they'll probably take it a little bit more cautious with him. And he hasn't necessarily set the world on fire, right? Like they were fine letting Dalvin Cook go and him being the top running back. And I mean, Dalvin Cook looks cooked as well, so I don't think they necessarily made the wrong choice. But I mean, I think he's averaging like 3.5 yards per carry this season. Didn't do much better today. Had like 8 carries for 27 yards. Hasn't been explosive. Hasn't been a guy who's moving the chains quite a bit. Success rate, I think, is like 41 or 42%. So I think they're probably maybe interested in just seeing what Ty Chandler has going on and maybe just move forward with him for the next week or two and let Alexander Mattison sit on the bench and heal up.
Free Ty Chandler movement. It's first significant win today when he got his touchdown. Not when Alexander Mattison got it. We do not celebrate injuries. But Ty Chandler before that got a touchdown. The free Ty Chandler movement is alive and well here. We had talked about him on this very episode of the podcast last week as a waiver ad. I know, Curtis, you had him in the waiver column last week as well. I'm not sure how many leagues he actually got added in, but at this point, I mean, he looks like he's going to be a high priority waiver ad this week.
And I prioritized him in my own leagues, and he was going for a ton. I thought he's a guy I wanted because I knew that A, Mattison could go south with just being inefficient, or B, if he gets injured, Ty Chandler he's so explosive. He's fun to watch, and I wanted him on almost every team, whether he's on your bench or whatever. You want that big playability, and he's going to have a 3-down role because what else do they have now? They're going to go find Myles Gaskin back off the Rams practice squad.
He's available.
Like here we go. So it's Ty Chandler or Myles Gaskin. You tell me which one you want handling the ball moving forward. So yeah, should be a fun week. I think we're gonna get 1 week with him as a bell cow, and should be fun to watch. We'll see what he has. And oh yeah, Keeney.
Our great producer Matt.
Yeah,
our great producer Matt puts in the chat, and he was right. I was going to bring up his name too. We do have Kenneth Walker, who is there as well. He ended up with 2 carries in this game. So yeah, we'll have to see. Ty Chandler has been played ahead of him this week and was even, splitting time with Mattison a little bit, ended up with that touchdown, like I said. So I think it's Chandler, but yeah, Nwangu is still there. So it's a very good call out by Matt. Like I said, there were some defensive injuries. Marshawn Lattimore has an ankle sprain. He got rolled up on. It didn't look great. They say it's an ankle sprain. We'll see. Trey Hendrickson had a very fluky injury in which Noah Brown was trying to get up to get back to the line of scrimmage, and he kind of like rolled into his knee. I don't know. Did you see that one, Tucker? That one did not look great to me.
Yeah, I did see that. It was just awkward. And when someone's as big as Trey Hendrickson and something awkward happens to their knee, you certainly fear the worst. That's something that I think hopefully we get an update in the next couple of days about.
And then we had Quan Alexander, who suffered, unfortunately, a torn Achilles. So he's going to be out for the season. So a tough break there for him and for the Steelers defense. The one other injury that we really need to talk about is Taylor Heineke had a hamstring injury, forced him from the game, led to Desmond Ridder getting back into the game. He actually had a rushing touchdown, but the Falcons couldn't hold on. They end up losing to the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray in his season debut leads a game-winning field goal drive, and the Cardinals are able to beat the Falcons 25-23. That's obviously a good win for the Cardinals. We can talk a little bit about Kyler Murray because I think Kyler Murray had a good game, especially coming back from that injury. But I think the headline here from this is, with all of the turmoil that has been around the Falcons and Arthur Smith, losing to this Cardinals team, is this the end, Curtis? Like, are we gone? Like, are we about to see Arthur Smith let go? This is a rough situation for him.
He's on the phone with Dad right now, getting a jet ride, finding another ride home. He is not showing up to the facilities tomorrow. There's no way, right? I can't be the only one that thinks this. There's no way he's showing up to the facilities tomorrow.
If I'm remembering correctly, Arthur Blank, I got his name right, the Atlanta Falcons owner, right? There was another coach, I think it was Dan Quinn, that he was very reluctant to fire in season. And so maybe that is it. Maybe he's just kind of reluctant to do that. And so, we'll see. But 70 yards passing against the Cardinals is a concern. Let's call it a concern. That is an issue. I will say, Tucker, he did get Bijan involved. So there we go. We got our Bijan big carry game, but even that wasn't really working. It's tough times in Atlanta right now, Tucker.
Yeah, he had 22 carries. They even had him back returning a punt. Like they were trying to get him involved any way they could, and it obviously didn't work. And when they brought in Ridder after the Heineke injury and he led that go-ahead touchdown drive, I thought, well, it wasn't impressive, but I think they clearly would rather Ridder take the reins. So maybe this is it, and maybe if they hold on, this can propel him to playing with a bit more confidence moving forward. And now, I don't know, it just seems like them at 4-6 versus 5-5. It's time to tear everything down. It's time to get Arthur Smith out of there and maybe, try to find a coach who can really build this town, because a lot of the guys flashed. Like Robinson had a touchdown today. Drake London had an unbelievable catch, I think, in the third quarter. And the talent, I think, there is offensively, but they just don't really know how to work it. And they don't have a guy at the range, right? Like they specifically chose to go into the season without a legitimate starting quarterback. And you're seeing it's rearing its head right now. And then on the other side of the ball is someone who started Kyler Murray in fantasy leagues this week due to some bye week issues. Can we let him run his own quarterback sneaks at the goal line? like why are we having Clayton Tune come in to vulture time? I've never had a quarterback TD get vultured by the backup. It's unbelievable. And the flip side is, if Kansas City's afraid to run quarterback sneaks with Patrick Mahomes, Get his backup in there. Like what are we doing? Our teams are going to start bringing in short yardage quarterbacks for situations like this if we're going to keep allowing teams to run the tush push and quarterback sneaks?
I think that's what happens when the quarterback has to sit on phone books to drive his car. I think it's a height thing because Bryce Young did the same thing with Bryce Young in Carolina earlier too. So I'm sure it's a height
Jacoby
thing.
Brissett did it. Jacoby Brissett did it for someone. Was it Baker that he was doing it for?
Because Philip Rivers wouldn't run. Philip Rivers refused to run the sneak.
Oh, that was Rivers in Indy, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I'm sure because we saw Young come out for QB sneak, so I'm sure it's a height thing.
What I'll say about so he lost the goal line, the goal line quarterback sneak, and that he's coming back from injury. That probably had something.
I'm sure that's
something to do with it. But he, from a kind of moving around perspective, which was a concern we had with Kyler coming back from this injury, he looked like Kyler Murray. He looks like a guy that could create with his legs. He did end up with a rushing touchdown. It wasn't the best passing game from him, but I was pretty impressed with what we saw from Kyler Murray coming off that long-term injury. Michael Wilson probably should have had a touchdown. And, the Cardinals aren't going to, make the playoffs. They're not going anywhere this year. This year is about trying to figure out what you have in Kyler Murray and figuring out kind of some of those pieces on the offense that they're trying to work in there. Michael Wilson, Trey McBride, who also had a good game. And I think from that perspective, this was a great start for the Cardinals as we kind of finish off the season. I will say one thing, and I'm interested in y'all's opinion on this. They purposely did not score a touchdown on 2 plays in a row at the end of that game, which is 100% the right thing to do if you're tied or if you're winning and want to run out the clock. But they were down by 1, and so much can happen with a field goal unit, with a field goal being missed, that it ended up working out. They made the field goal, but that's a weird decision to me to not take the points in the lead, especially if you're playing against Desmond Ridder. Did that stick out to either of you? Either of you found that odd?
No, you got to do it. I think it's like the chip shot. Where were they at? It's like
they're at the 5.
Yeah, it's like the old extra points. It's like a 99% play. I think they did the right thing, and you just gotta hope that you don't fumble a snap or something crazy happen, and all should be good. I like it.
Yeah, I guess.
It's just like I guess you look at your opponent. If it's CJ Stroud, you definitely do it. But if it's Desmond Ridder and Art Smith, like, does it even matter? Like, you could give them an extra 5 minutes and they're not getting down.
So the next game we have, actually, we have a question here in the chat. I want to get this. I want to send this straight to you. The question is Tony Pollard startable anymore? I'm going to lean back and I'm just going to let you go. And I'm going to drink some water. Have some fun with this question.
Yeah. How about CeeDee Lamb? He had a really good game today. I know CeeDee Lamb's pretty startable these days. He's got a really good schedule coming up. I'm trying to find positive in these Tony Pollard teams because he doesn't look good. But again, I think I've tweeted it, and Ray is mentioning in our group chat about Rico Dowdle. Rico Dowdle has never taken a run for more than 10 yards. His career high is 10 yards. So
except he's not. He had a 21-yarder today. He set his career high today. He got a 21-yarder today.
When is that? After I turn the game off? After I start tweeting about him, he's good. Son of a gun! Now I'm cursing Tony Pollard myself. Yeah, I don't know. He does not look good. There's something wrong there. I don't know if he did some weird training in the off season, but he looks awful. And he's not catching passes. Last year, he at least caught passes, and he didn't even play as many snaps last year. And you need to utilize him in the passing game, but the offense goes through CeeDee Lamb now, so it's tough. I can't put him on the bench because he's still getting the looks inside the 10 when they get there. He just finds a way to stumble short of the goal line every single time, and the one time he did score a touchdown in the last couple of weeks, someone was off there. Someone reported ineligible or something like that. So he's still getting the money touches when they get down there. He's not getting as many as he did at the beginning of the year, but they're still there. The Cowboys are still a good offense. Maybe it just clicks at some point in time. I don't know. It doesn't look good, but
I think the touch comment is the important thing. And Rich and I talk about this on the Thursday show a lot is in the fantasy landscape we live in. If you have 2 other top 15 running backs or 3 other top 15 running backs,
Mhm.
sure, for sure. I think you're gonna have to keep moving Pollard down your rankings. But and it's a lot like the conversation we had with Kenneth Walker. If you just have a running back who's going to get 15 to 20 touches, and he still got 15 touches in this game, they blew it out. They blew out the Giants. And that was something that had been holding him back early in the season is when they got into these very odd game scripts, he kind of just went away. And so he still even got the touches today. But whenever you have a running back getting these touches, it's like that's all you can almost hope for. And now we just have to hope for the best that it's going to work out for Pollard. And so it's a tough running back situation in general, which makes the Pollard discussion tough. So it's roster by roster, but we'll see. All right, let's move on to another fun game we had here in the afternoon slate, and that was a back and forth game between the Chargers and the Lions. The Chargers end up losing this game as they always do in one score games. The Lions end up with a late field goal to take the win. This game was really exciting. When I watched this game, like these are two good teams and these are two good quarterbacks that we're watching execute. One of those teams is in a really great position in the NFC and might end up being in the number 1 seed. The other team might end up missing the playoffs, and so it's kind of a tough situation. But I guess we have to get started with the Lions. Tucker, I feel like the Lions, they needed this win after what happened to them against the Ravens. Obviously, they had the big win back in week 1, but they had been beating up on bad teams. I feel like they needed this win to really say, yeah, we are what our record says, and we deserve to kind of be mentioned in the area with the teams that were being mentioned.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the Lions, there's still a lot of talk the last couple weeks about that they should be a dark horse option to be the number 1 seed in the NFC. And this honestly looked like their toughest game for maybe the rest of the season until they played Dallas. In week 17. I mean, after this, they have Chicago, they have Green Bay, they have Chicago again, they have Denver, they have New Orleans. Like this game on the road against a Chargers team whose record isn't fantastic, but we know how talented that team is. And for them to just consistently come back, I mean, they don't stop fighting ever. And they're a team historically, and I know thinking about things historically don't often work out, but historically the Lions tend to fold in situations like that, where when Justin Herbert tied it up, I think they tied it up 2 or 3 times in the fourth quarter. The fact that Jared Goff and that offense just kept coming back and they kept firing haymakers, and what Ben Johnson and they decided to do when they went for it on 4th and 2, instead of kicking a field goal like 90 seconds to go to just go ahead and pray the defense could hold up. And instead of doing that, you go out, you go for it. And not only that, but you throw it to the tight end up the seam for a gain of 20 and effectively ice the game and let yourselves win it on a game-ending field goal. I mean, the Lions, honestly, have been just impressive every week. And we can discuss and quibble about their schedule. But what we saw today, I think, was probably the most impressive performance from any team we've seen. And looking ahead, compared to what the Eagles have on their schedule, they already have a game advantage on both the Cowboys and the 49ers. The Lions are in a fantastic position moving forward, and they're a team that I don't know if I really want to face them in the postseason because they have a lot of success playing in these close games right now.
I was thinking about the Vikings, and we kind of glossed over this a little bit. I wanted to talk about it. The Vikings being, just an absolutely great win for them, and the Vikings looking like they're going to make a playoff push. When you look at the Vikings schedule is very favorable for them. But one of the kind of areas you look at is they get the Lions 2 times in the last 3 weeks. But then I was thinking about it, and will the Lions have anything to play for in week 18? They might already be the number 1 seed. You mentioned the Eagles schedule. The Eagles have an absolute bloodbath coming up after their bye week. They could definitely drop a couple games there. The Lions schedule does not look tough at all, aside from, like you said, that Dallas game. We get to week 18 with the Lions with the number 1 seed and it's locked up. That definitely is something that could happen. And so this is definitely, they're in a great situation here. We finally had the team of the offseason, the hype team of the offseason. They're finally succeeding. And so here we are. They look like they're the real deal. On the other end, it's pretty clear to me the Chargers are a good team and would have made the playoffs in the NFC. Like that is pretty pretty clear to me, but the schedule has killed them. The schedule coming up is easier, but they still have the Ravens, the Bills, and the Chiefs left. I just don't know. They can't win one-score games. I mean, I don't. This might be a bridge too far for this Chargers team.
Absolutely. Brandon Staley's defense lets them down yet again on a game-ending drive. The offense can put up points. That's never been the question, but you've hired a defensive head coach who somehow finds a way to lose every one of these games by giving up points in the fourth quarter. It just, I think we're gonna have seen the last of Staley as well, because this is a really good football team. This offense, even without all these weapons, this offense still
Keenan Allen missing time
at will. They made Jalen Guyton put up touchdowns today. They even got Quentin Johnson a touchdown. That's how good
Johnson's
this
put a
offense
touchdown. What a time to be alive. What a time to be alive. Yeah, no. Keenan Allen we should mention, Keenan Allen did miss time. He came back, but, was that adrenaline? What was going on in the locker room after he went to the locker room? So that is definitely an injury also to pay attention this week and kind of see where we go. Tucker mentioned the Lions being maybe the most impressive performance of the day. I will have to disagree and say the 49ers and what they did to the Jaguars, especially after that 3-game losing streak. They go to the bye. They absolutely need this win to really to say, all right, we're back. That was a very odd 3 games. They came out. They just crushed the Jaguars, absolutely destroyed them. It was not a game. And it looks like the 49ers that we had through those first 5 weeks, maybe they found themselves in the bye, and they're back to looking like part of the class of the NFC.
Yeah, they looked like the team we saw the first 4 or 5 weeks of the schedule. We talked about it last week that we just needed to kind of see them put things together, and having the bye week certainly, I think, helped. Brock Purdy made a couple like that first touchdown to Brendan Ayuk. I don't think is advisable, and he kind of got bailed out by an unbelievable catch.
That's in my notes. That is 100% in my notes. Is that what we saw from Purdy during the 3-game losing streak was that those ill-advised throws turned into turnovers. And he had been running on kind of the positive side of variance for a long time. And then we come back in this game, and his first touchdown is another one of those throws. And that might just be the Purdy experience, is we're going to have highs and lows based on whether those throws turn into turnovers or not. This week it worked, and it was a touchdown. So, here we are. They won.
Yeah, his turnover-worthy plays were turnovers, and now they're touchdowns again, and all is right in San Francisco. But, yeah, what we saw from this offense, he was 19 to 26, 296, 3 touchdowns. McCaffrey ran really well, although he did get a touchdown. Although I didn't really enjoy the whole side quest thing they did at the end, where even though they're up 34-3, let's try and do everything we can to get McCaffrey a touchdown. Just felt weird in the moment. But, I mean, for a team like Jacksonville, we talked about it a lot last week. Teams like Seattle or other teams that haven't necessarily beaten a great team, even though they had a decent record. I mean, Jacksonville only had 2 losses. Them and the Chiefs are the only 2 teams in the AFC with that record. And I don't know, they just kind of got exposed offensively today. And I know Trevor Lawrence came in with an unbelievable pedigree and was the number 1 pick in the draft. And was viewed as the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck or Peyton Manning, where everyone you go back to. And I don't know, this is another big game where he kind of folded. 17-29, had 2 picks, wasn't necessarily impressive. And there were some drop passes, sure. But, I mean, this is a guy who's going to be getting a contract extension soon. Is going to get paid. And I don't really know what Trevor Lawrence is. Like, he's not a top quarterback, I don't think. He's not a guy that going into a playoff game, if I have him on my side, I'm excited and thinking, well, he can beat anybody on the other side of the field. It's just weird. He just seems like a guy. And for someone who came in with the highest of hopes, 3 years ago in the NFL, Trevor Lawrence experience just feels odd right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I will say with the Jaguars, they have a win over the Bills. And so that helps them. That puts them in a better situation than, someone like the Dolphins, who don't have any win even on that level, got blown out by the Bills. And so they do have that win over the Bills. It was in London, take whatever caveats you need. But this loss is a very game, yeah, exactly. But this loss is a bad look. And I think that bringing up the Trevor Lawrence thing is important, because I can't think of any time this year that I've really, really been impressed by Trevor Lawrence. The offense just has not been right. They've been carried by Travis Etienne, who's been having a great season. But the passing game, Calvin Ridley after those first couple games. We've kind of getting hit or miss from him. Christian Kirk has been, pretty good, but like this offense leaves a lot to be desired. Lawrence has left a lot to be desired. And yeah, now they have a big competition with CJ Stroud in this division, and it's going to be interesting to watch kind of down the stretch what we get from this team.
Yeah, especially the narratives around these two teams is because you're looking at the Texans and you've got this, oh my goodness, these guys can't be stopped. And they're still a couple games back of the Jaguars, and everyone's like doom and gloom on the Jaguars. So it's kind of interesting. And I'm going to disagree a little bit with Tucker. I don't think the 49ers look like they did in the first few games. I think I was always low on the 49ers, but you look at that defense now that they got a little more swagger there. Now this team might be trouble. This team might be a force to be reckoned with when you add that much more talent on the defensive line, and the offense still scores at will. That's what they do. They're just efficient. They just don't play very fast. If they could probably score 50 every game if they played quick. This could be trouble. I think this was a spot where I'm going to move the 49ers up in my rankings a bit.
Chase Young, you mentioned Chase Young had 2 quarterback hits, a half sack. Nick Bosa had 2 quarterback hits. Javon Hargrave had 3 quarterback hits. The pressure rate from the eye test, I don't have those numbers yet. The pressure rate looked high. And so, that worked out. That trade worked out.
Expose our cornerbacks if you don't have time to throw. And that's kind of where they're going with it. And man, they were good.
This was a very good game for them. We're running out of time. I do want to mention a couple things real quick. Mac Jones benched again for good this time. Like, what are we like? Unlike the other 2 times he's been benched this year, this is the 3rd time he's been benched this year. That seems like a problem on itself by itself. But we'll skip that for a second. Unlike the other 2 times he was benched this year, this was when the game was still in doubt. They were asking Bailey Zappi to go make a game-winning drive. Tucker, to me, that feels like a big, big deal, especially going into the bye week.
Yeah, you don't do that if you have confidence in the kid, right? Like, you don't normally do that when the game is on the line, when all you need is one drive. And if you're confident in your quarterback, usually even if he's had as bad of a day as Mac Jones, that interception he threw in the red zone may have been the worst pass of the week. It's baffling. It's a choice, and I don't think you can go back to him, right? Like, I think what we saw today might have been the end of the Mac Jones experience, unless Bill Belichick is doing some weird thing and he is a genius and he has some greater plan. This feels like for the next week they're repping Bailey Zappi at starting quarterback, and Mac Jones is going to be the number 2.
Yeah, I get that opinion too. And like I said, since we're going into the bye week, that gives them a lot of time to make that happen if that's what they want to do, what they want to be moving forward. And I mean, I think the real answer here is that the starting quarterback for the Patriots, the future starting quarterback for the Patriots, is not on the roster right now. I mean, what we've seen from Bailey Zappi does not fill you with a ton of confidence. And so, yeah, I think that this is kind of like, all right, we're done with Mac. We're gonna see kind of what the Raiders did last year with Derek Carr. We're gonna see what Bailey Zappi has, but really we're gonna be moving on. So yeah, it's an odd situation. One more team I wanted to get to. We kind of mentioned at the top, Curtis, but the Steelers, they keep winning. Like I said, they've been outgained by every single team they've played this year, but they keep winning. They're 6-3. They have wins over the Browns and the Ravens. Make it make sense, Curtis. What is happening here?
Yeah, they're just last year's Vikings. They're living on this absolute wild ride of wins where you don't outplay the opponent, and you're just on this crazy variant streak. The defense gets turnovers at the right time. They've had was it the Browns game where the defense scored the only touchdown, they're starting to run the ball a little bit better, but that's just to keep the ball out of Kenny Pickett's hands. And it's wild. They have the same record as the Ravens, and it doesn't make any sense. They're awful on offense, but they're getting it done. It's just the Mike Tomlin thing, man. It's how this team works. Yeah. Anyone bet on Mike Tomlin for Coach of the Year at any point in time?
Right. So he's not a bad shout right now, but I think if the Texans continue on this trajectory, DeMeco Ryans is a shoo-in for the job, for the award. So that'll be fun to watch kind of how that shakes out. The Steelers next week have the Browns, so they have another chance to kind of get another big win. We'll see what they're able to do as we move forward here into week 11. Tucker, anything stick out to you? Anything you're paying attention to? Any storylines that are interesting to you?
Yeah, I mean, that Steelers-Browns game I find interesting because those are two teams that you mentioned before. Their previous game was a disaster, and Pittsburgh came out on top. And they're two teams that have the same record, but when they're in the same division as the Ravens, and who knows kind of where that whole thing is, because I don't think either team has necessarily been super impressive on both sides of the ball. But I mean, I think the biggest game next week, and we're going to talk about it beforehand, is Eagles-Chiefs on Monday Night Football. I mean, that's two teams who are 8-1, 7-2. Might not be the most impressive 8-1 and 7-2 we've seen. I think there are other teams that maybe have passed the eye test a little bit better, but I don't know. I think after Eagles Cowboys last week, which I thought was the best game of the year, I thought the Chargers Lions game might have been the most entertaining game so far this season. I mean, that's the next game I think on the schedule that I have circled and say, well, that's going to be where everyone's sitting down and get your popcorn ready.
Then we got that game on Monday night, and then on Thursday night we have Bengals at Ravens. So after this dreadful week of primetime games, they're giving us some great games on Thursday, a great game on Thursday, great game on Monday. We don't need
Vikings,
to talk about
Sunday night next week if you're into that.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about Sunday night. But yeah, we're actually gonna have some good primetime games next week, Curtis. Like, yay, it's exciting.
Yeah, and even this week, we were without the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Dolphins, and the football was actually kind of fun to watch today. I think this was my favorite week of the year so far. So we've been complaining about how bad the product has been. I had fun watching today, so I look forward to what we've got cooked up next week because we see some good teams in action again.
Yeah, the NFL season has certainly turned itself around from kind of the dredge that we were seeing earlier. And so it has been a fun couple weeks, and we hope that continues. If that does continue next week, we'll be here to talk about it on this podcast, the Sharp Angles podcast. So make sure you join us at 7:30 Eastern on YouTube to check that out. Subscribe to the podcast. Check out everything we've got going over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Remember, if you use the code ANGLES, you can get 15% off any package we offer at sharpfootballanalysis.com. And we will be back to talk with you next week.